Welcome back, boils and ghouls. So normally at this point in the video, I'd start with like a little witty thing, maybe a joke or a quote from the movie, but there's really nothing that I can say about this thing that shouldn't be preceded by a trigger warning. So, this movie discusses sexual assault and may be especially triggering to anyone who has dealt with this kind of violence before. You have been warned. And with that lovely business out of the way, and before we get into the really fucked up stuff, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. I post regular movie reviews and gameplays, all with a horror theme to them, so trust me when I say that you won't want to miss what's coming. Don't believe me? Stick around to the end of the episode to find out what movie I'll be discussing next time. And now, it's time to talk about another movie that has been banned in several countries and has been named a video nasty in the UK. Reportedly, writer-director Miyazaki came up with the idea after he helped a rape survivor one evening. He was out with a friend and his daughter when they were approached by a young woman who had been severely beaten and raped. They argued about what the best course of action might be, whether they should take her to the hospital or to the police first. But out of fear that these men might still be out there targeting women, they decided to take her to the police first. Once they got there, however, the entire process proved frustrating. One officer, who Zarchi described as not being fit to wear the uniform, was especially frustrated. Asking the young woman to describe the attack, give her name, and spell it out for him despite the fact that she had a broken jaw. Eventually, Zarchi managed to convince the officers to just take her to the hospital already, but the event sat with him for months. He began workshopping the idea in his head, and he only gained further inspiration when he began staying at a friend's remote cottage. And from there, a screenplay was born. Once the film was actually released, however, it faced a lot of hardship. First released in 1978 under the title Day of the Woman, it completely failed at the box office. The movie was renamed several times after that, including I Hate Your Guts and The Rape and Revenge of Jennifer Hill. But it wasn't until distributors came up with the title I Spit on Your Grave that this movie found its audience. And by its audience, I'm mainly referring to film critic Roger Ebert, who didn't only hate this movie, he declared war on it. He called it the worst movie ever made and has been quoted to say, "The people who made this film should really be ashamed of themselves, and so should the people who booked it and the people who went to see it. It's really an inhumane, sick film." He wasn't the only person who had that opinion either. Many critics panned this film for its lack of identifiable characters and its nearly 30-minute rape scene. To this day, the longest rape scene in cinema. And British feminist Julie Bindel would hold pickets outside of theaters that would screen this thing, accusing it of being incredibly sexist. Just to recant her stance years later and actually refer to it as a feminist movie. In fact, quite a few feminists have kind of reconsidered this movie in recent years and began to consider it a bit of a power fantasy. And this of a movie that was universally panned for being offensive to women when it came out. So what's the deal? Does the movie hold up or not? Well, I think that the best way to answer this is to look at the movie itself. So the movie follows one Jennifer Hill, a writer on vacation at a secluded cabin where she intends to write her next book. While there, however, she catches the eye of Matthew, a developmentally challenged man who delivers her groceries. Afterwards, Matthew goes back to his friends who berate him for being a virgin, but Matthew insists that there's something special about Jennifer. The first 20 minutes of the film just kind of follows Jennifer enjoying her solitude and trying to put something down on paper. But these damn boys won't leave her alone. And then one day, while she's sunbathing in her boat, the boys grab the boat and drag it away. They strip her naked and try to goad Matthew into assaulting her, but when he won't, one of the other boys does it instead. They let her go, allowing her to run naked through the woods before they catch up to her again, and then one of the other boys assaults her. They let her go again, even allowing her to get as far as her house before they catch up to her again. And it's at this point that Matthew and and the remaining boy both assault her. They also mock her manuscript and rip it apart, before encouraging Matthew to kill her and then clearing out. Matthew, however, can't bring himself to do it, so he just wipes her blood on the knife and then leaves. Okay, we are now an hour into this 100-minute movie, and yes, that is all that's happened. Nearly 1/3 of this movie's runtime is rape. It is, without a doubt, the most difficult to watch rape scene that I have seen in a movie. I think the worst part about it is that it just lasts so fucking long. And you think you might be safe for a little bit just for it all to happen again. Not to mention, Camille Keaton, who plays Jennifer, is a great actress. Her screams of pain are haunting, but that just makes it worse. I called August Underground and its sequels the worst movies that I'd ever seen, and that's probably still true just because they tried to pass themselves off as snuff films. This movie almost rivaled that one at points, and that's without trying to claim to be real. The other thing that I found uncomfortable about this scene is that I didn't know how much we, as the presumed heterosexual male audience member, were supposed to find this appealing. Jennifer is naked the whole time, including when she's just walking around afterwards looking dazed and hurt. And it doesn't help that we've seen Jennifer's naked body before this, always in a sexualized context. I mean, who are we supposed to identify with here? The victim or the perpetrators? Anyway, let's move on before I puke. Jennifer spends a bit of time in her cabin, silently healing from her wounds. Will the boys panic about the possibility of being caught, and more so when they realize that Jennifer is still alive? But the plot picks back up again when Jennifer invites Matthew to her cabin. She runs through the woods like some sort of nymph, strips herself naked, and then proceeds to have sex with Matthew before hanging him to death. She then goes after the other boys one by one. The most graphic scene occurring when she entices one of the boys to have a bath with her before cutting his genitals off and leaving him to bleed to death. Then the film just sorta ends. Okay, so I'm just gonna say this. The way that they characterize Jennifer is weird. And by that I mean they don't characterize her at all. We know that she lives in New York, but we don't know if she has a boyfriend or a family. We don't know if writing is her full-time profession or if she works elsewhere. We don't know if she's a recluse or a social butterfly. To a certain extent, Jennifer almost isn't a character, or at least she isn't human. Especially considering she's so connected to nature, she's often seen frolicking through the woods, either in revealing clothing or completely naked. She almost feels like some sort of goddess, or maybe a sprite. I sort of got the feeling that this was about 4 men offending a goddess and facing her wrath as a result. But on the other hand, maybe the fact that we don't know very much about her is meant to build on one of the movie's themes. When Jennifer goes after one of the boys, he starts ranting at her about how she was clearly asking for it, because she dared to have nice legs and walk slowly, or she wore a low-cut shirt when Matthew was delivering her groceries, you know, that typical bullshit. And there's also this running motif of the boys saying that she must be a slut, because all the girls from New York are. But the thing is, we don't know anything about Jennifer's personal life. Maybe she is promiscuous, or maybe she's a virgin who lives alone with 10 cats. End of day, it doesn't matter, because she wasn't asking to be beaten or gang raped by 4 monsters. If we knew more about her, it might be easy for the audience to pass moral judgments against her without even realizing it. But since she's a blank slate, the only thing that we have to work off is the brutality of that 30-minute rape scene, so it's hard not to feel bad for her. Not to mention, because she's a blank slate, she could be literally any woman. She could be your girlfriend or daughter or you, the viewer. But on the other hand, the fact that we know so much more about the boys than Jennifer feels sort of off. I mean, are we supposed to sympathize with the developmentally challenged boy who gets hanged by the neck by this temptress? He acts so much like a child and he didn't mean to do it, he was pressured. Or is it, as some feminists have argued, a power fantasy?
I don't like women giving me orders. Shit.
a way for women who have dealt with such abuses to imagine getting revenge. It's estimated that 90% of rapes go unreported and only 1% of rapists will actually face jail time. So, maybe the fantasy of cutting his dick off doesn't seem so bad after all. But on the other hand, look at this poster. Why does she need to be in her underwear for this? And was seducing the men and actually having sex with them really the only way that she could think to put them in the perfect position for murder? Really? There were no other options? If you can't tell, I'm really conflicted about this movie. I can see both sides. Somehow it manages to straddle that line between fucked up rape porn and power fantasy for actual survivors. That 30-minute rape scene is hard to watch, but it may be necessary to build up the last 40 minutes of the movie. I mean, who wouldn't want to commit murder after that? The characters are underdeveloped, there's really no way around that. It especially bothered me with Jennifer. I feel that the movie should have taken more time to actually follow her mental processes while she was trying to heal. Maybe this is just one of the faults of the movie being written by someone who I presume is not a survivor of sexual assault. I mean, I could always be wrong, but I found no reference that Zarchi is a survivor of sexual assault himself, just that he met a girl who was. And the script just kind of has that impersonal feel of someone who knows what sexual assault is, but just can't put themselves in the headspace of what experiencing it would be like. All in all, this is another movie that I just can't recommend because of the subject matter. But if you've seen this review and you think that you can handle it, then I'd say give it a watch. The main thing that swayed me toward that opinion is quite simply that I've never seen a rape and revenge movie quite like this one. It's brutal. It really goes out of its way to prove to you that the revenge is justified. It really makes you want to see this guy bleeding from his genitals and begging for death, and I feel like that's the goal for any rape and revenge movie. It is not a viewing experience that I ever want to repeat, but it was an interesting one nonetheless. So in total, I give this movie 5 conflicting moral lessons out of 10. Now, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. Because next time, we're getting super witchy up in here and talking about the craft.
Girls, watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
And trust me when I say that you won't want to miss it. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and while you're down there, why don't you leave me a comment? Let me know if there are any other rape and revenge films that you'd recommend. Thank you so much for watching, my pets, and I will see you next time. Love you.